Who was Molly Brown? From the Associated Press. Denver, Colorado. In Denver, Colorado, thousands of miles from the ocean, a museum tells the story of a woman made famous by the Titanic, a ship that sank in 1912. Her name was not Rose, the fictional character whom Kate Winslet portrayed in the 1997 movie Titanic. It was Margaret Molly Brown. Molly Brown, portrayed by Kathy Bates in Titanic, was a real person, but that movie, as well as another 1964's The Unsinkable Molly Brown, created a myth that the museum attempts to dispel. Kristen Iverson, author of Molly Brown, Unraveling the Myth, says two books written in the 1930s said Brown was unsinkable and created the image of her as a gun-packing, wisecracking woman. These accounts became the basis of the 1964 movie starring Debbie Reynolds. They also helped shape Brown's character in the 1997 movie. Iverson says that Brown's life was more complicated than most people realize. Born in 1867 to Irish immigrants in Hannibal, Missouri, Margaret Tobin followed her brother and moved to the mining town of Leadville, Colorado when she was 18. There she got a job in a dry goods store. After marrying mining engineer J.J. Brown, she moved out of town to be closer to the gold mines during the winter. The Browns ultimately found gold and struck it rich. Margaret moved to Denver, where she became known for her charity and social reform work. She raised funds to build a church as well as shelters for poor children and orphans. By the time Brown boarded the Titanic in 1912, she had separated from her husband. An ardent traveler, she was returning from a trip to Egypt to visit her ailing grandson in the U.S. The Titanic was to take her from France to New York City. Brown wrote that she was watching from a deck after the Titanic struck an iceberg just before midnight on April 14, 1912. She was assigned to lifeboat number 6. Brown rode all night with the lifeboat's mostly female passengers until the rescue ship Carpathia arrived. The Titanic sank at 2:20 a.m., a little more than 2 hours after hitting the iceberg. Brown was one of just over 700 survivors from the ship, which had been carrying 2,228 passengers and crew members. After the sinking, Brown gained fame for raising money from rich Titanic survivors to help poorer passengers, making sure they had a place to go when they got to New York. Returning to Denver, Brown remained in the public eye. In 1914, she was called on to help ease tensions after the National Guard opened fire on striking coal miners, killing 20 people. Brown also helped with relief efforts during World War I. She ran for the U.S. Senate in 1914, 6 years before the Constitution was amended to give women the right to vote. The Molly Brown House Museum, a Victorian mansion where Brown once lived, is offering Titanic-themed tours in 2012 to mark the centennial of the disaster. Recently, visitors were surprised to learn that Brown, despite having an 8th grade education, spoke several languages, which came in handy with the Titanic's international collection of passengers. They also learned that Brown had planned to take another trip on the Titanic, in part to take advantage of its well-stocked library. Some of Brown's own books are included in the museum's library, which, like the rest of the home, is lit by dim 15-watt bulbs like the ones she used. Upstairs, there's a copy of Brown's Titanic insurance claim. The claim records the loss of several items, including 14 hats, furs, and a $20,000 necklace. Brown's love of travel, her willingness to live by the gold mines, and her never-ending pursuit of new interests indicate she had an adventurous spirit. Adventure ran in her blood, so the strength and courage came from just plugging away, said Janet Kallstrom, the museum's Brown impersonator. Brown died in 1932 in New York City while pursuing another lifelong passion, acting. The end.